Welcome to Egghead Anarchy. It's been a while. Nice to be back. How are you guys doing? So sorry about the couple weeks, couple week gap. We just, decided to take a break for a couple weeks. Stuff happened, and we are back now with a vengeance. No, I'm just kidding. So we will, to try to make up for the couple week absence, we will actually be releasing 2 episodes this week. There'll be this episode today, Monday, and then we'll be releasing another episode with more Overwatch stuff on Wednesday. So try to, give you guys a little bit of something extra. So yeah, this week, or today, we're going to talk about Auteur developers, and a large chunk of that is going to be spent talking about Hideo Kojima, and some good discussion around Death Stranding, the new game that was announced at E3, as well as a lot of time talking about Metal Gear, like the whole series, our thoughts on it, all that kind of stuff. And then we also touch on, King's Quest and the Williams and other Auteur developers and stuff like that.
Suda 51 and dick jokes.
Yes. Yes.
Only at the very end. Just a little bit.
Alex and your dick jokes. Very good. Cool. So yeah, it's good to be back. We hope you guys like this episode, and let's get to it. So, Kojima. Hideo Kojima. You want to talk about Kojima?
Yes, and his new game that he's released. Death's not released. What am I saying? Revealed.
Yes.
Revealed to the world.
At E3.
At E3, yeah. Death Stranding, starring Norman Reedus. Looking kind of Asian in that trailer, I thought.
Well, I mean, some good news, I guess, is that instead of ridiculous female nudity and sexualization, now he's, it's ridiculous
Reedus.
male nudity and sexualization.
Naked. And I was kind of like, when I saw it, I was like, is that guy looks super familiar? Is that somebody? Oh, it's Norman Reedus. Okay, yeah. That's kind of cool. It's kind of weird, but okay.
Well, and I gotta say, it was cool that that they're getting to do something with the way that like PT and all that stuff fell through with Konami. And by the way, I'm probably at least once going to confuse Konami and Kojima, and I'll switch the two just so everyone's aware that will probably happen.
And we're bringing up PT specifically because Norman Reedus was slated to be in PT, like the star of PT.
Yes.
And then that fell apart when Kojima was allegedly forced out of Konami.
Yes.
And apparently he still bros with Norman Reedus, though.
Yeah. I don't know how much so he is with Guillermo del Toro, with the way that Silent Hills fell apart, but...
I'm not sure. It seems like Guillermo del Toro has a lot of things going on right at the moment for him.
Yeah. I'm not. Well, yeah, we're not talking about him, so I'm not going to talk about him. But So I guess what are your thoughts on Kojima? Because I definitely have some thoughts, and to be completely honest, I'm not that familiar with most of the games that he's produced, just because the little bit that I've played, I was either not impressed with, or completely confused by, or grossed out with, and so I haven't really dug that deep into most of them. I definitely have some very strong feelings on him and his games and his influence on the industry, but I'm more interested to see what you think.
Yeah, so it's worth noting that the thing that I really like the Kojima game that no one remembers or cares about, except for like 4 other people other than me, which are the Zone of the Enders games.
I was just thinking that there's a lot of people that love those games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not enough to warrant any sort of sequel at all at any point, though. To be fair, there are 2. So there was a sequel that came out pretty shortly after the first one came out, but then no more.
They're just gone. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because not Silent Hills. What is it? The other thing.
Metal Gear?
Metal Gear Solid is so much more popular.
Yeah.
So.
Which just baffles me. Totally baffles me.
See, I think Kojima is really clever as a designer, and he does a lot of really clever things with the medium that other people don't do. With writers, I think Kojima is a lot like the video game equivalent of what's his name? Douglas Adams or Terry Pratchett. Yeah. Not in tone, but in the way that they use the medium.
How so? Okay, this is super interesting to me. So, what do you mean? So,
I think all of these people use the medium that they're in very novel ways and really unexpected ways. So there's a Terry Pratchett book that just has a page with just the word yes printed really big across the page. That's the only word on it. And that's the kind of thing where it's like you wouldn't see that kind of breaks the rules about how you interface with a book. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And I think Kojima does a lot of things like that too. Like he has a really good understanding of the medium and he uses it really well. Things like one of the boss fights in one of those games. I think it's the end who you fight. And you have to die during the boss fight. You have to die, and then it gives you a game over screen, and then you have to access your menu, like open the start menu during the game over screen and use your like fake death revival pill or something. So it fakes you out and it gives you this like weird thing that you would not necessarily expect from the medium, or like fighting Psycho Mantis in Metal Gear Solid, whatever, the first one, I guess, and Twin Snakes, which are the same game, except it got remade with more flips and shit. They made the cutscenes way more like extreme, but so you fight, what's his name? Psycho Mantis. That's right. Are you familiar with this boss fight?
No.
Oh yeah. So you fight him and he's psychic. So he knows what you're going to do before you do it. So all your attacks whiff when you try and attack him. And so you have to get it so that way he can't read your mind. And the way you do that is by unplugging the controller and plugging it into a different controller port.
Are you fucking kidding me?
No. And he does.
That is so stupid. I'm sorry. That is so stupid.
He does.
How do you know to do that? How would anyone know to do that? Does the game tell you?
If you don't solve it for a long time, it tells you, or for a while, it tells you. But he does things like he knows that you're playing on a console. He's able to tell you stuff about your console before that. That's the thing that clues you in on this, is that he tells you what games you've been playing recently on your console, which game you've spent the most time playing, things like that, because it reads the memory card and it goes through the memory card and like looks at what you've been playing. And it gets like, you recently were playing blah. I see you really like blah, blah, blah. And he gives some hints like that he can see like what's going on in the console. And then you unplug it and you plug it into the other controller port. And then similarly, there's another puzzle where it gives you, also in Twin Snakes, where it's like you need to call somebody on the phone, on the codex. It's a phone, basically. And you don't have their number. So you're like, what the fuck is the number? And they're like, it's on the back of the box. And you're like, what fucking box? But there's a screenshot on the back of the box of the game in real life of you talking to that person on the phone, which it displays their number when you're talking to them. So you actually get out the box, look on the back, and it's there.
Okay, so cerebrally, I can appreciate the cleverness of that.
Yeah, so here's the thing.
However,
I've never played very far in a Metal Gear Solid game because I find them annoying to play.
That's my problem as well. Yes.
But I really like what he does with them, and I like watching other people play them, but not so much playing them. I also have to say that I'm really bad at them, and I get caught and shot a lot when I'm trying to sneak places, which is also very frustrating.
Yeah, see, so I played the, I guess the original one for PS1, right? And like I just, it didn't make, and maybe this is me, maybe the problem is me, but it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Like there didn't, so like the stealth sections, I remember you were on a boat and I forget what you were doing, but like I had to sneak around this boat, right? And my friend Zach was all about this. He's like, you got to play this game. You got to play this game, blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay, whatever. And so I started playing it. And the game, I felt like didn't do a good job telegraphing to me in a way that I could understand where I needed to be and what I needed to do.
I think there is. It's got a very old stealth system like that is based around cones of vision. Like it's weird from a modern stealth game perspective to how that game works, but it's all about just like not standing in front of dudes where they can see you kind of thing, I think is what it is. It's been a while since I've played it, but I remember being very bad at it and having a lot of difficulty. But I think it's...
And then like the story for the games, like I remember, so again, Zach, this is I think there was a version of Metal Gear that came out for the N64.
Yeah.
And this version was unique in that once you beat the game, you could go back and you could watch just the cinematics, like back to back to back to back. So it was almost like a movie, right? Like you could watch, it was like a 2.5 hour movie basically. And he had me over, and again, he was super excited because he loved the story and thought it was really good, and he wanted me to watch it with him. And I was like, okay, cool. So I legit watched this entire thing, and I had no fucking clue what was happening. Absolutely none. And one of the things is that all of the names of the characters made no sense to me. Like Liquid Ocelot, and he's like, well, it makes sense because blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, but this is the equivalent of if Marvel was to make movies about their comics, but put all this shit in the movies that you had to have read the comics to know, and then tried to sell the movie on its own. Like, so he played all the games, and so he knew all the logic behind all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it made sense to him. I didn't. And I didn't understand the logic behind anything. All I knew is that this weird character name over here is apparently related to this guy, who's related to this guy, who wants to blow up this thing, and blah, 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 blah. And it was just so convoluted. And there were so many, not even layers of indirection. It was just convoluted and confusing.
It's
and
Liquid
it didn't
Snake.
make any sense.
What's that? Revolver Ocelot, but I think you're thinking of Liquid Snake.
Oh, maybe, maybe that's...
Because Liquid Snake is like a fucked up clone of Big Boss, and Solid Snake is like the better clone of Big Boss, so they're brothers. But they're both cloned off of this super soldier guy who is Big Boss, and then one of them turned evil because he wasn't cloned right, and he ended up blonde for some reason and doesn't look anything like the guy he was cloned off of, and I don't know.
What?
And then Revolver Ocelot gets his hand chopped off, and then it comes up later. They use the hand to do some, like, I think Hideo Kojima thinks he's a much better writer than he is.
Yes, that is exactly what I think. I think he thinks that he's much more clever than I do.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing.
And I don't think that is wildly terrible. Like the writing in Metal Gear Solid, I think dialogue is often a little weird, but I think that like overall plot structures are kind of interesting, but they're very much like you can't just pick up a game. Like what you're saying, it's like many long running series. Like if you picked up the third Lord of the Rings book without ever looking at Lord of the Rings before, you'd be like, what the fuck? What the fuck is this?
Yeah.
It's more like you need to be on board with the story from like wherever. And I think Twin Snakes is supposed to be a starting point for a lot of people. I'm not sure about that, but maybe.
Well, and I know 5. So I played a little bit of Ground Zeroes, like the demo or whatever for 5. And I know it seemed like they did a lot of work in 5 to make it accessible for people like me who hadn't really, like patchwork here and there, seen the story, but I'd never really played through any of the games. And so I didn't really have any idea what was going on. And there was text that I could read that would tell me about all the characters and the locations and the story and all that kind of stuff. And I will say this, reading that, it seemed interesting, right? Yeah. And I didn't realize that Metal Gear was supposed to be set like in the real world, right? Like espionage in the real world in like the 70s or something like this. Like 70s, there's a lot 80s.
Of different, there's a bunch of different times periods that it takes place. Based on like which series.
Definitely not confusing.
Well, because there's different characters that it follows. It follows Big Boss back in the like 70s maybe, and his espionage thing and starting this like Foxhound, who's like a group of mercenaries. And then he becomes the head of that, and he establishes it, but then he dies or something, and they make clones of him, and then it's about Solid Snake, who's his clone, and like that's, you know, like 10 years later or something, and then it's him when he's older, which is like another 10 years later or whatever. So there's like a couple of different time periods. Like, I mean, you know, that kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah, I guess. And maybe that's part of it is, and I think maybe this might also be part of the reason that people who love Metal Gear so much is because it's very much like an in or out type thing. Like people who've played through the Metal Gear games and know the lore and the universe and stuff, it seems like there's so much there. Like even just what you're explaining, like little inside things like, oh, well, Solid Snake is this, and this game is in this time period, and this game is in this time period, and he's older here, and this is his clone, and blah, blah, blah. That's cool stuff. You know what I mean? Like if I was in on that, I feel like I would be, you know, like comics, right? Like Marvel, you know what I mean? Like I'd be like in on some club or something like that, you know?
That's a really good way of describing it. It's like comics. It's got this really, really complex lore, and not all of it is well written. But you know, people like it. Maybe not always because sometimes it's great, and other times you're like, that's fine. And then, but it's got this big world that's full of different characters and like this really complex lore that you can dive into, and you can learn about all the different things, and you can read about the fan theories and stuff. Like, it's a very big world that's very developed. And it's that. Got kind of a unique tone in that it's this like real soft science fiction espionage world, which is kind of neat. And, you know, there aren't a lot of things like that. It's all spies with robot bodies and shit fighting with samurai swords and nuclear carrying mechs and stuff. You know, it's neat. It's like this science fiction. I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, again, I like watching a playthrough, like a let's play of that. I haven't played one in a really long time. I think I still have Twin Snakes somewhere, but I've never beaten it because I'm bad at it. Like, it's worth noting that is also part of the reason. Like, it's not just that some things are annoying, like knowing to unplug the controller and plug in Psycho Mantis. Like, that's kind of annoying, but also I'm just not very good at it.
Yeah. Well, and I think for me, like, just even talking about this now, I think I'm beginning to kind of realize the disconnect. And like, so to me, Metal Gear has always seemed like this, like pulpy, silly, ridiculous, very detailed, very nuanced, very complex world, right? And there happens to be games, you know what I mean? But it's the games and the gameplay are not the point. Like that's at least from my kind of looking at it from the outside, it doesn't seem like the gameplay is the point of Metal Gear. It seems like the point of Metal Gear is the world and the characters and the story and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I also think, the clever ways that it deconstructs the medium of gameplay.
And that's interesting. Yeah, and that's interesting.
Like I deconstructing the fact that your game comes in a box. It's like your game comes in a box, and that box actually has like photos of the game. And that means that there is information about the game on the box of every game that you buy. And so we've taken that and we've utilized that. Like that, I think
that's interesting.
That's where Kojima really shines as a developer, is that you're like, this is very like, that's clever and interesting in the way that it messes with this medium. And that's one of the things that Kojima said about Death Stranding recently was that, let me see if I can find the actual, here it is. In our teaser, we featured both the connecting strands of handcuffs / umbilical cords and also stranding of whales. I don't know what that means, but moving on. Of course, there's also other hints in there, the dog tags being one of these. Our game is still far from being released, but the game, in quotes, game, has already begun. What are you able to spot? So Kojima is saying that, like, you're already playing the game. You've seen the trailer, now you're already playing it. Like, it's not out yet, but things are happening. And knowing the shit that I know about Kojima, that could be possible. Like, there could be stuff in the game that relates back to this trailer.
Interesting. So have you seen the trailer, the E3 trailer?
Yeah.
So the whales is the whales on the beach, right? They're like stranded on the beach. They're dead.
Is that stranding on the beach? He said this game is about ropes and connections. So I think stranding is like strands, like ropes, or, you know, like bits of things that span between two things, strands.
Okay, so this is interesting, and I will say Kojima's got me now because we're gonna start digging into this trailer here and like guessing and philosophizing on this trailer. So before you just said that, because I didn't read that, like Kojima saying that, I thought Death Stranding was the dumbest fucking name I'd ever heard for a game ever.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? But
and with the invisible shit, it might be, and the whales, it might be an intentional double use of the word stranding to mean both alone and connected.
Yeah. Well, and then what's interesting is so the dead baby.
Yeah.
Right. And Norman Reedus freaking out about the dead baby. There's a connection between them, some kind of connection between them. And it seems like, so everyone is assuming, and with the weirdness that I know of the Metal Gear story, it seems like, there's a good chance that Norman Reedus somehow gave birth to this baby, especially with a scar that was on his stomach in the trailer. However, I think that I don't think it should be assumed that that's the case. Yeah, that he gave birth to this baby, because it could very well be like. See, there has to be other humans in this story, I would imagine.
I kind of assumed that the baby wasn't dead and that Norman Reedus was dead.
Whoa. Okay. Whoa.
And that's why he has a big ass scar, because he's dead. He got like fucking stabbed or something. Like, but
then how would he be like getting up and holding the baby and crying and whatever?
He's in the land of the dead.
Because everything else is dead.
Yeah. Kojima said that this is specifically going to explore death in a video game. He said some cryptic shit about like putting coins in an arcade machine and how you're not really dead in games and stuff. So that's one of the themes he's working on. And the other theme is connections. And he said it's going to play like a normal action game, which I would say is fairly typical of most things that he makes, like most of the Metal Gear Solid games. Like fairly typical, like controls and whatnot, not anything wildly weird. But he said after a couple of hours of the game, it's going to get weird and there's going to be stuff with ropes and shit. And I don't know what that means, but we'll see, I guess.
Okay.
I'm kind of on board. I like a weird thing to just be like, this is weird and interesting. I'm down with that,
Yeah. I mean, like, I definitely. So I'm more intrigued. Like, as little as I've cared about Kojima before this point, I shouldn't say Kojima. As little as I've cared about Metal Gear games before this, I will say that I am much more interested in at least learning more about Death Stranding than the majority of all the games that I saw demoed at E3. Because they're just continuations of stuff, like it's the next Gears of War, it's the next this, it's the next that, it's Watch Dogs 2, whatever it is. The other big game, this has nothing to do with Kojima, but I want to bring it up because I'm in like disbelief. Like Cloud9, I can't even. Oh my God, it's got a release date. What is that? Like October 24th or something? The Last Guardian.
Oh yeah.
Holy shit! Can I just say, holy? Oh my God, I can't. I'm not even thinking right now. Like my mind has gone blank. Like I can't even. Oh my God, there's no way the game is going to live up to all the hype. There's no way that's going to happen.
Well, I'm hearing bad things about it currently. I don't know. A lot of it's speculation, I'm sure, but. Well, not all of it's speculation. People are saying that it looks bad because it was just pretty much all programmed for PS3. So it looks more like a PS3 game than a PS4 game.
I don't really care though.
So long. Yeah, I don't care. But like, that's fine. Whatever. Yeah. None of their games have looked bad in any case. And they all look pretty stylized.
Yeah. Like Ico was, it looked decent. You know what I mean? Yeah. For PS2, it wasn't really all that great, but it wasn't the way that it looked that was amazing. It was the story. It was the characters. It was the interesting puzzles. It was the fucking girl. You know what I mean? Like, she was incredible. You know what I mean? Like, and her relationship.
Ico.
Oh my God. Dude, you need to play that game.
I didn't.
Oh my God.
This is my unpopular opinion. I did not like Shadow of the Colossus.
Never played Shadow of the Colossus, so I don't know.
I got killed like 4 times by the first boss, and I couldn't figure out how to fucking play the game. And then it kept sending me back to the beginning, and I had to travel like 5 minutes to get to the first boss, and then I would just die, and I didn't understand what I was supposed to be doing, and that pissed me off, and I quit playing.
See, okay. Okay, so here's that. So tying this back to Kojima, that would be me playing Metal Gear with this controller thing, because there's no way I would ever have figured that out. And I know that. Like, I know myself well enough to say that. And I mean, maybe that's the thing. Like, what everyone else sees as cleverness with Kojima, I see as like just silly and stupid. Yeah. But the problem is more me. You know what I mean? It's more that there's no way that I would figure that out.
Yeah. One of the things that I noticed watching Let's Plays of Shadow of the Colossus is that in the PS3 version, the remastered version, they added in more tooltips that tell you what to do in that section. So I feel a little justified in how upset I was about that, because obviously the developers were like, yeah, all right, everybody gets confused at this point. We need to put more shit in to tell them where they should be going.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely feel like Shadow of the Colossus is a very niche game that that developers really love, because there's a lot of technical things that they did really, really well. Like, I think I've watched a few of the extra credits. Like, was it Dan from Extra Credits? Like, he'll go through different games and like pick them apart in detail. Like, he'll do like 30 episodes playing through some game. And I watched several that he did of Shadow of the Colossus, specifically talking about animation.
Yeah.
And he ended up talking about a bunch of other stuff too, like the camera system and the way that worked, and like all these little things. And watching that series and listening to him talk, I'm like, this is probably why Shadow of the Colossus is such a cult hit. Yeah. Like, it's hard to get into, and just like Ico, like, I mean, the story for Ico was never explicitly ever told. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it was very much kind of a tangential thing. But there's so many technical things that development team did really well. Yeah. That for people who pay attention to that kind of stuff, it's just mind blowing. Yeah. You know what I mean? I think so. There's a very small segment of the population that just love those games. And what I'm really afraid of, and what I think is going to happen with The Last Guardian, is, being that it's getting so much attention because it's been in development for so long, is people who don't know anything about this developer or what to expect from them are going to play the game, and they're going to be like, what the fuck is this? You know what I mean? And it's potentially going to be destroyed just by the hype. Like, because
I don't think so.
Really?
Not if it's good. I think it might end up like Dark Souls kind of did, where there were previous games kind of in that same vein, and like each one got more popular and people got more on board with it. And then, you know, it just picked up more and more people. Like, I don't think people will be turned off maybe as much as you might think. Especially as the hype goes up and people are like, yeah, play it. And then people will not quit immediately because they want to talk to their friends who are playing it about the game. You know what I'm saying?
That's a good point. Yeah, it's a very different world now than it was like when Shadow of the Colossus came out.
Yeah, Demon Souls did not do huge business. It did pretty big. People were into it. And then when Dark Souls came out, though, people had heard about Demon Souls and they're like, all right, I'll get on board this now. And then when Dark Souls 2 came out, even more people would be like, yeah, okay, I'll get on board with this now. I think it's kind of that kind of thing where, you know, people have heard about it and they're more willing to try it, since other people are like, no, I swear, I know it's weird when you start, but like, it's good once you figure out what the fuck you're doing.
Maybe that'll be really interesting, because like, I really feel like a big part of the reason that Metal Gear is Metal Gear, and that it's such like a fixture of the gaming world, is Kojima. Like, just the weirdness of him. You know what I mean? Yeah. And him as an icon. Like, I think if the Metal Gear games existed and were exactly the same without Konami, I knew it. I fucking did it just then. Without Kojima being in the picture, I don't think they would be nearly as popular, and I don't think they would be nearly as big a deal. But I think Kojima himself is just so enigmatic and weird and flamboyant, and like what he's doing with Death Stranding, like he throws these things out there and he gets people's attention being him. Yeah. That then translates into the game. I guess what concerns me about, like, I should say that translates into interest for the game. And then people play it and they're like, you know, people like me play it and they're like, I don't get this. But enough people play it and like it, right? Like the story and like the gameplay and all that kind of stuff, that it just kind of builds, right? What's concerning to me is that Team Ico doesn't have a Kojima. They don't have someone who stands out. They don't have this enigmatic presence. You know what I mean? It's just their games. I
kind of think this is interesting because I think we're kind of on a theme, and I'm going to bring up another thing on this theme, which is auteur developers.
Oh yeah.
And I think weirdly and kind of in an interesting way, Team Ico is an auteur developer, but like all together. Team Ico just is the figure. They don't have a Kojima, but they just are Kojima together. Like people recognize what they do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, and I don't know the name of the developer that does Dark Souls, but I would say that they're the same thing.
Oh, I know that. I think the developer who does Dark Souls is becoming slowly more and more of like an auteur developer who people recognize the name. Mm-hmm. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but
yeah, I'm totally blanking. And I know like if I were to hear, I'd be like, oh yeah, of course, duh. Yeah. But yeah, and I think
he also made my least favorite Armored Core game, Armored Core 4.
Kojima?
No. The guy who made Dark Souls. Because From Software also makes the Armored Core games. Which
From Software, that's right. Yeah. Yes,
Please release another Armored Core game. I like Dark Souls, but also I like Armored Core. Please go back, make one again. Come on, man.
Was Armored Core the game that had that massive controller?
No, that's Steel Battalion.
Steel Battalion. Okay, yeah, that's right.
And then Steel Battalion had the Kinect game that didn't work. Anyway.
Kinect. Fuck Kinect. Yeah. Anyway, I feel like the game industry is becoming more like the film industry in that there is room and more room all the time as development tools get better. It's easier for auteur developers to exist.
And because
you don't need massive teams to get really high level, high quality output. Like Hello Games is another good example, I think. I think they might be up to 12 or 15 people now, but for the majority of the work done on No Man's Sky, that was 4 people.
Yeah.
And they built all that shit from the ground up themselves. You know what I mean? The fact that 4 people can do that, that's incredible.
Yeah. I think auteur developers were big, and then they kind of died off for a little while. And now there's some coming back. Because, if you look at like the early 90s, it's all Roberta Williams, John Williams.
Yes.
Is John Williams right? What's Roberta Williams' husband's name?
I don't remember.
Something else Williams. John Williams is also a composer.
That's why King's Quest. Yeah.
But and then, Lord British, whatever his name is.
Richard Garriott.
Richard Garriott. I almost said Edward Garriott. That's not right at all. Richard Garriott. The guy who made other stuff. The other guy who I always get confused with Richard Garriott.
id Software. I mean, like for most of the games that id made for a long time, they were like 10 people. You know what I mean? There was John Carmack, John Romero. Yeah. Yeah.
American McGee.
Birth name. He was also at id. Yeah.
Well, are you aware of that?
What's that?
American McGee's real name is American McGee. Like that's his birth name.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's just amazing. It's amazing.
Yep.
It's such a great name.
Oh, yeah. So, and this is yet another example of me being a total douchebag. Like, for a long time, I hated him. So I'm like, what the fuck kind of name is American McGee? Like, who is, why would he change his name to that? And then I found out, I was like, oh, no, he was born. Okay, I'm an idiot. I'm an asshole. That's his birth name. Like, he wasn't doing that for attention. Like, that's just,
child of...
That dude is fucking smart as hell. Yeah. So, do you know what he did? Like, what he's been doing for the last, I don't know, decade or so?
No, what?
He moved over to China
and
started working on free-to-play games because he was like years ahead of the rest of the industry. He's like, this is where it's going. And the Chinese market is where everyone wants to be because it has so much more growth potential than the US market. So he just straight up moved over to China and started making games over there. Dude's been making fuck tons of money for a long time now, but he doesn't have the like celebrity status that he had over here. So he can live like a much more normal life over there. Super, super interesting story. Yeah. Like, was Alice, American McGee's Alice. He actually hated having his name put on things because he didn't want to be a celebrity. Like he just wanted to make games. Yeah. So it was, I think it was the publisher. Was it Activision? I forget who published the American McGee games. And part of it, he's like, I didn't make this game myself. Like, I'm not working on these games myself. There are tons of people working on these games. If my name's going to be on there, all their names should be on there too. Yeah. And it's like, that's actually like good on you, man. Like, that's a really good attitude to have. So yeah, like, he's actually a really pretty cool guy and really, really creative. And like I said, way ahead of the rest of the industry in terms of like where it was going financially. Yeah, and I think kind of to your point about the industry starting out being like, that's all that game developers were back in the beginning. You know what I mean? Like, it was like literally one or two people building things, putting them on floppy disks. You know what I mean? And it wasn't until EA came along and Trip Hawkins, where he's like, hey, why don't we actually start charging money for this and like make this more of a professional thing? And then EA came about, and even for a long time, they were the big like developer distributor, but big back in those days was not what it is now. You know what I mean? And they were literally like riding by the seat of their pants, making shit up as they went. Super, super interesting story. And, you know, same thing with Activision Sierra. Like, that's a company that you barely hear about anymore, but they're actually huge. You know what I mean? They're just kind of like in the background. Oh, yeah. Was it Activision?
They don't exist
Sierra?
Anymore.
Is it really? Did they become Activision? Because I know they were around for a long time and they were huge.
Yeah.
And then I just stopped hearing their name, but they didn't go out of business.
Well, they got bought out. And then
that's what it was.
They got bought out by maybe EA.
Yeah,
I say EA
really?
because I think they got dissolved, basically, and EA was the one who did that a lot. That's the only thing that I'm really basing that off of, because EA bought out a lot of these studios and then just basically dissolved them and just used the name for stuff.
Damn it! Now I want to look this up, because I thought it was Activision. I thought Activision and Sierra merged.
Well, Activision
and Sierra's name just went away.
Yeah, Activision and Blizzard merged. And it is. Yeah, it's a subsidiary of Activision Blizzard.
Okay, good. So they're still around?
No.
Because I want to say that
but no.
That I've seen stuff with their name on it recently.
So it stopped being around in 2008, and then in 2014 they revived the studio. So basically, they stopped using the Sierra label on anything in 2008. And then in 2014, Blizzard was like, we could sell like new versions of King's Quest and shit, and we'll just put the Sierra logo on it. And then they did that.
Nice.
And they got, not Christopher Lee. What's his name? Doc Brown from Back to the Future.
Oh, Christopher Lloyd.
Christopher Lloyd to be in it, and like all kinds of people.
Oh, yeah. Well, wait. Okay. So that is I'm blanking on the name, but that's actually developed by the original Williams couple who developed the original King's Quest. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, cool.
Yeah. So like that was their independent thing. Yeah, and that I remember because I played, what was it? The first episode, which they made, which I got for free, like being on PSN or whatever, being a PSN member. And it's actually really good. It's kind of very like Princess Bride-ish in that it's Christopher Lloyd, who is the king, telling stories about when he was younger to his daughter. It's really cute. It's really good. Yep. It's very kind of like old school adventure-y, quick timey, like not point and click, because you don't like, you use your controller to walk around, but it's like this really interesting, like non-point and click, and the writing is really clever and it's very funny. It's good. I highly recommend it. But again, Auteur creators and Chris Roberts, although I don't know that I would call him Auteur anymore, like with Roberts Space Industries and the whole way that Star Citizen is going. But he's like another kind of, character, you know what I mean? Like anything that I saw with his name on it, Wing Commander and then Privateer and whatever, anything that I saw with his name on it, I would buy, because if he was associated with it, I knew it was going to be a good game, and it's the same thing with Star Citizen. Like
I actually don't see, the Williams names anywhere attached to the new King's Quest game. They weren't actually on the development team. The development team. I'm looking at an interview with Matt Korba, the game's creative director, and he worked with them and talked about what their design strategies were with them and things like that, so that way they could continue on the series. But they weren't actually on the development team. It sounds like they just consulted on development to make sure that it was a King's Quest game.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So I was just confused.
Yeah.
Damn it.
And see, I think they maybe purposely confused you a little bit with the marketing coming out on this game, where they were like, hey, let's just, they consulted on it or whatever. So we'll say, we'll talk about them while we're talking about it. So that way people think that they're really involved with it. And it sounds like they were involved, just not in an actual development capacity.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Because, this is like what I'm skipping around through here now, this YouTube video. This is what I saw. But yeah, this is very much, hey, there's a new King's Quest game. And
and we've been paid by Activision to come here and talk about it to you.
Yes, exactly.
And sort of endorse it just because, we did it originally. And that's really cool, actually, that Activision did that, because it kind of means a lot for a series if they're continuing it without the original developers to be like, hey, can we kind of get your blessing on this? So that way we can continue it, and we'll, involve you, not like necessarily specifically like you're going to make it, but like we're going to make sure that you have some, like you talk to the people who are making it now and they get the chance to pick your brain about like how to make these games. That way they keep making them in a way that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that makes a lot of sense, because one of the things that I liked a lot about the new King's Quest is that it felt very King's Quest-y. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it felt very true to the old games that I remember playing. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's good. So I think it's interesting that the industry is kind of coming, I wouldn't say it's coming full circle, because there are still, there's these massive, like The Last of Us. I mean, that development team was hundreds of people. You know what I mean? Same thing with Assassin's Creed. All the, like, not all, but a lot of the big AAA games, they're made by just these massive, massive teams. But more and more, like you were saying earlier, we're seeing a resurgence of these auteur developers who can do this weird shit. You know what I mean? And I think it's interesting. So I've been one of the podcasts I listened to. I want to say it was, I forget if it was Rocket or Disruption where they talked about this, but Brianna Wu was talking about like all this stuff with Konami, right? And just all this bullshit with Konami. Not so much specifically with Kojima, but it kind of touches on that a little bit. Like Konami basically getting out of video games, right? Yeah. And, making whatever the slot machines, whatever. Yeah, exactly. And she's saying it's interesting that they're doing this, because more and more there's less and less money in like AAA titles, you know what I mean? Yeah. And she said one of the complaints that Konami had about Kojima is that his games were just so expensive to make that they didn't really earn a whole lot of money. And in fact, they lost money on several of the Metal Gear games. And they're like, we can't do that. Like as a business, we can't do that. And
they make a crap load of money on pachinko machines.
Yes.
And they seem like they really are just like, we don't really want to be doing this. It doesn't make sense for us. And I can totally see that. If you were a person who just loved pachinko machines and didn't give a shit about video games, you'd be like, yeah, finally, Konami's just going all in on the pachinko. Like if that was your hobby, you'd probably be like, yeah, great. Sounds good. I'm in with this. Although I do question, like, who is a Silent Hill pinball machine for? Like,
well, and I mean,
that's not for a Silent Hill fan, because they want a game. Yes. And then if you're a pachinko fan who doesn't give a shit about Silent Hill, why would you give a shit about a Silent Hill pachinko machine?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and more even than getting out of games, like what really pisses me off about Konami is the incredible amount of disrespect that they showed, not only toward Hideo Kojima, whatever I think about him, whatever. I mean, the dude he's as we're saying, he's an icon in the industry. And even aside from that, you cannot make games on the scale of Metal Gear without a tremendous amount of work. You know what I mean? So just based on the amount of work that he's put in, that he's given them, and the time and the number of years that he's given that company, the way that they kicked him out and that they fired him was just utterly ridiculous. And then beyond that, the disrespect that they showed to the game community at large with just pissing all over PT and Silent Hills and be like, fuck you guys. We know that you guys want this and this looks amazing, but we're not going to put in the work to try to find a way to make this happen, even if we don't do it, right? To sell the rights to someone else, or to allow someone else to do it, or to maybe make this a pet project. No, we're just going to say, fuck you, and this isn't going to happen. And on top of all this, we're going to put an NDA on Kojima so that he can't talk shit about us or say anything. And we're basically going to try to starve him out of the industry, like, dude, so that he has to go do something else.
And they've been doing that with all of their big designers. And according to a lot of people, they've just refused to acknowledge that those designers did them any good and refused to acknowledge their accomplishments.
Which is utterly ridiculous.
Koji Igarashi, who developed the Castlevania games, is having the same exact issues. And that's why he left and started his new, like, he kickstarted his thing. I think this is why we're seeing more of these auteur developers, is because they have options to make the games that they want to make, either by making small games in an indie space or by like using crowdfunding, or like on something like Steam. Like, you don't need a lot as much publisher support to like put something on Steam, you know, even if you do go with a publisher, like don't necessarily have to do as much, especially if you're somebody who has background, like you've made games before and people know your games. Like, you don't need as much advertisement budget necessarily. Yeah. People will spread it via word of mouth talking about it. Yeah. And same with the developer of Mega Man, who just released
that's what I was just going to say.
Yeah. So
I was going to say, of course, that's the dark side. That's the flip side to all this, is that sometimes these auteur developers, you know, they break out on their own and they fail. I mean, like,
I don't know about fail. Okay. So I kickstarted that way back, like immediately when it first came out. And I've been playing it recently. Okay. So,
what do you think about it? Because I haven't played it yet. I've read a lot of reviews and a lot of thoughts, and they've been universally bad. But what do you think?
It's not bad. It's okay. See, here's the thing. I feel like I was a little bit dumb because I forgot some shit, which is I'm thinking about Mega Man X and like Mega Man 2 and 3 and stuff. And I'm like, those games are really good. I'm going to get another one of those. But I forgot all the games that he made like after Mega Man X2. Like, he made a lot of games in the PlayStation era, like these 3D, like side-scrolling kind of games, and they were okay games for the most part. And this game is just those games, basically. It is not the old classic Mega Man. It's the new PS2, PS1 Mega Mans.
Interesting.
So it's not, it should not have been unexpected the way that this turned out, maybe. Like, if you looked at the history of this developer, you'd see that he stopped making those games that like maybe people were expecting like a long time ago, and he started making these other things. I think that it would be pretty good. Like, I would significantly upgrade my opinion of the game if it looked better, but it looks pretty bad. Like, it's super ugly. Like, I mean, it's not super ugly, but it looks more like a real cheap Unity game than it does.
Yeah, from
like
that
a real
one
professional game.
Yeah, that one really terrible ad that they put out, the whole thing about like the otaku on prom night or whatever the fuck that was, which was like crying
like an anime fan on Prime Night.
Yeah.
Fuck you, dude. Who do you think's buying your game? Anime fans.
Exactly.
Gosh.
I was like, wow. And the biggest thing to me was that like in the 90s, that would have worked. That would like that. I mean, that was Sega's, like that was Sega's attitude, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, like they didn't necessarily insult their fan base, but they were just like, you know, we're brash and we're rude and blah, 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 blah. Buy our games.
Kids,
everyone was like,
this.
yeah, this is
not
cool.
Nerds.
Yeah,
These
exactly.
games aren't for nerds. You're like, it seems like that's how it works.
Well, yeah, I can say it seems like that's what they missed. Like Inafune missed that nerds are now the cool ones. You know what I mean? Like, and there's now this understanding that everyone's a fucking nerd. Like people who love sports, they're sports nerds. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like there's video game nerds, there's movie nerds, there's comic book nerds, there's book nerds, there's sports nerds. Like that's it. You know what I mean? So like, don't go after nerds. Don't say this isn't for nerds anymore because that's what everyone is. But like watching that trailer, I looked at it and was like, this doesn't look good. Like this looks like you were saying, it looks like cheap and like amateurish. And even the way that it moved, like I was like, this doesn't seem to flow. You know what I mean? Like it seems kind of like broken-ish. I don't know. But again, that was just from the video. Like I haven't actually played the game. Maybe at some point I should, but I don't want to pay whatever it is, $40 or whatever this game is. $20. And something else that I heard that I'd like to get your thought on, being that you backed. So being a backer, you get like one of the DLCs or do you get both of the DLCs?
All of the DLCs.
All the DLCs. Okay. So one of the things I read,
unless the DLC comes out in the future.
Okay, but all the two DLCs that were released initially, you get access to those, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah, there are 2 DLCs, but I also got another code for like a backer exclusive DLC.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Which was just like a different skin and was pointless and dumb and who cares?
Nice.
But it was Golden Beck, which is just Beck recolored to be all gold. Great. Thanks. I'm sure that took 2 seconds out of someone's day to do. I don't care. It also just looks dumb because it's all gold. Who cares? Moving on now.
Nice.
But yeah.
Tell me how you really feel. So something that the Jimquisition review brought up is that the DLC, like this is kind of a good/bad thing. So specifically the bosses in the main game are just not good. Like they're not creative, they're not inventive, whatever. However, the bosses in the DLC are much better. Is that your experience or no?
One boss in the DLC.
Oh, okay.
And no, I don't agree at all. I think the bosses in these games are actually pretty good for the most part. Maybe there's a couple of things that I have gripes with, like the fire boss who has an attack that has the same wind up every single time, but does a different attack after the wind up. So it's really fucking impossible to tell which thing he's about to do.
Oh,
so he does a little wind up and then charges across the screen. And at the halfway point of the screen, he either keeps charging, jumps into the air, or just explodes right there. So if he explodes right there, you have to stay standing at the edge of the screen. If he jumps, you have to dash under him. If he keeps charging, you have to dash over him. But it's fucking impossible to tell which thing you need to do, except at the very end. And that's really bullshit and annoying. And it reminds me of Mega Man Battle Network, which just had fucking impossible bosses. And again, that's the kind of thing where it's like, some of the games that he's made since Mega Man X had these issues. But I think there are some levels that are really interesting. Like there's and some things that are really interesting uses of like traditional stuff, like the sniper level where you fight the sniper boss is like a big circular level, and he hides somewhere in the level, and you have to like run through the level while he's sniping at you and like try and find him. And it's a really interesting mechanic and a really interesting play on these traditional Mega Man levels where you're not just going like up and right. You go around in this looping circle and like try and find this guy, and he's sniping at you the whole time. So there's like this constant hazard, and it's pretty cool. That level was good. So yeah, it's pretty okay. It's like a 70. It's like, all right. And it would go higher, I'd say, if it looked real good. Oh, and also if it sounded real good. The music's kind of boring, which is disappointment from Mega Man game.
That's too bad.
And the voice acting's real bad. Real bad.
From what I heard, the writing is really bad too.
It's fine. I don't know. It's fine. I don't care. It's not what Mega Man. I've never been into a Mega Man game because of the writing. You know what I'm saying?
That's fair. That's fair.
So it just feels like an okay Mega Man game that lacks the polish that it should have. And also, to be fair to people who backed it not on PC, like they're just like, it'll come out on Vita sometime. No release date, just sometime. Like that's dumb. Yeah. It seems like they have some real issues with like how their stretch, and this seems to be an issue for like every Kickstarter that I've backed. The stretch funding fucks up their project. Like, so, you put stretch goals on Kickstarter, and the stretch goals are always like, buy more voice actors, add in additional platform support, and that shit. They're always like, we ended up spending a shitload of money on that and time, and then we had issues like getting the other stuff done, and like, and maybe we don't, like, it all seems to go to hell, and I don't understand why stretch funding is like a thing like that. Like, you're like, this is how much of the game we want to make the game. If you give us more money, we'll maybe just work on it a little bit longer. But then also we'll just make more money off this. Like, that's it. Because we're basically selling you a copy of the game in advance. Like, but people feel the need to justify every single cent they get through Kickstarter. And people who back on Kickstarter often want every single cent justified. And I think that fucks up the economy of it. Because then they've already promised shit for every single cent. So if they go over budget on stuff, then they're fucked and they don't have the money to continue.
Yeah, and I think so. I know I read. So one thing that I think is really really good is Mr. Inafune-san. I don't know what I should say, but
Inafune.
The what's that? Inafune?
Maybe.
Okay, that guy. He owned up to everything, like all the failures and everything, really well. Like I had a lot of respect for that. I read a Kotaku article where they did an interview with him, and he basically just said, "Yeah, this is completely my fault. Like I own up to everything." And the explanation that he gave for things, I think, if he hadn't owned up to all the problems, would have sounded a bit like, I don't know, complaining a little bit. But because he did, it was like, okay, basically it was, he didn't really understand what was involved. Like it was basically, his eyes were bigger than his stomach was. And he thought that it would be easier to release on like whatever it is, like 14 different platforms or whatever the game is coming to than it actually was. And because of that, like there was just a lot of things that he drastically underestimated the difficulty of doing. Yeah. And just stretched the project way too thin.
Yeah. And that's not surprising for me. And I think that is what happens to a lot of these projects that get kickstarted is that people who have previously always worked with a producer before did not actually understand the full range of what the producer was doing and like what they and so they kind of fuck up on this. And I wouldn't be surprised if he made a second game out on Kickstarter that it would turn out much better. Again, me too. I think people are wildly down on this game mostly because of how high their expectations were. And that in the ultimate scheme of when everybody looks back on all the things that he did, they'll just be like, oh yeah, that's fairly okay. It's okay. Like it's not the best one, but it's pretty average for like his output.
Yeah, I think this is very interesting. I hope that there's a trend that I see maybe starting and that I hope continues. Yeah. So Mr. Inafune, whatever. One of the things that he said, and I've heard a few other people who've worked through Kickstarter say the same thing. One of the things that he said is, what people need to understand, and what he didn't understand, what he didn't think about going in, is that like raising $4 million does not mean that the project got $4 million. Yeah. The project only got 60% of that. Like when it was all said and done, taxes and, the bit that Kickstarter takes out and all that kind of stuff, they only got 60% of that $4 million.
Yeah. See, that's what I'm saying. I think those stretch goals fuck people. And I think specifically they just need to be like, this is how much money we need. And then any extra money we'll use for the inevitable things that go wrong. Like trying to bill out all of your money kind of fucks up your shit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and so like something that I hope for gamers, and I don't know how realistic this is or how much this is actually going to happen, but I hope that gamers over time start to kind of get more realistic about how this shit works. Yeah. Like how difficult it is to make a game. And getting more visibility into things like for example, bringing it back to Kojima and Death Stranding, like being inventive and creative and trying to do things differently is hard. You know what I mean? And partly because, and I remember, like one of the things people get upset about is that, more and more games look the same, like, especially with like first person military shooters, right? Like they kind of look indistinguishable. And like, while that's frustrating to me as well, like there are actually reasons for that. And one of the reasons for that is that like when you work with a tool like Unity or Unreal Engine or Crytek or something like that, you get a lot out of the box. And one of the reasons for using tools like that is that they save you a lot of time and a lot of money. Well, if you start going in and you want your game to look different and so you write your own shader, well, then you're losing some of the time that you saved using this tool because shaders are hard to write, right?
Do you know local game developer TJ?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he writes and builds his own shaders in Unity, and they look fucking amazing. But like when you see, like, do you remember his game at the last Game Jam? The one where like they're swimming around with the sharks, you're like surfing, and like that game looked way, way better and more interesting than a lot of the other stuff in Unity. Because it looked so much more unique because he had built that shader and that game. You were like, oh, that doesn't just look like every Unity game. That looks really unique.
Yep. But anyway, I'm willing to bet that shader took a lot of time and there was a lot to it. Yeah.
I don't know that he did that during the jam either.
Oh yeah, I did a shader in 48 hours.
Yeah.
I find that very hard to believe. But yeah, and that's the thing is that there are I think gamers, myself included, we heard in the beginning of this me bitching about things about Kojima, we're very quick to complain about things that we don't like. There are certain things I think that I hope, myself included, I start to consider a bit more before I complain as time goes on. There's a reason that Call of Duty and Battlefield and all these military shooters, and even to some extent Gears of War, look kind of the same and look similar. And some of that is just technical issues and money. You know what I mean? And Mighty Number 9 is a good example of when you don't budget well. Yeah. Or even when you try to budget well and there's just shit that comes up that you don't foresee. Yeah. That has an impact on the game that is visible. You know what I mean? When you don't, and even Star Citizen with the $100 million that they've raised so far. And as good as that game looks, there are people that are complaining because they're not producing as quickly as they want them to. Yeah. And it's it's because this game is trying to do so many things that are new and different and that people haven't done before. When you build that stuff from scratch, when you create something new that hasn't existed before, it takes time. Yeah. You know? And
they just updated their TOS. Have you heard about that?
Who, Star Citizen?
Star Citizen, yeah.
No. What'd they update?
You can't get your money back now.
Ooh.
So it sounds like what's happening is they're not going to release on time as projected, and they've changed the TOS that way you can't get your money back because it doesn't release on time.
Ooh, I can kind of see that from their perspective, but that seems a bit shady.
Yeah, it sounds like they're they need that money real bad, and they're worried that people are going to start taking that money out. They're having budgetary concerns.
I could totally see that. Especially when you hire the number of actors at the caliber that they have.
Yeah.
And you pay developers what they're paying. Yeah.
Yeah. Something else about Kickstarter is that I think people are wildly have no understanding of game development when they back stuff. And when I back something, I'm that'll be out at some point. That's it. That's my expectation. In a few years, I'll get this game. Not and I tend not to pay that much attention to the date on it because I'm just realistically, things come up and these schedules change. This is somebody telling me when the release date is before they've started development at all, basically.
Yeah.
On most of these games.
And this isn't unique to game development. Development of any kind. There's a general rule in development when estimating, and that is determine what the longest you could possibly think under any circumstances and everything going wrong something will take, and then double that and add 10%, and that might be close. Yeah, that's just the way that it works. You know what I mean?
There's a rule. I can't remember the name of it, but it's somebody's rule, and the rule is it will always take longer than you think, even when taking into account this rule.
Oh yeah. Just always, yeah. And then of course you have things like the Mythical Man Month, right? And then if it takes one woman 9 months to have a baby, it takes 9 women 1 month to have a baby. You know what I mean? And as stupid as that sounds,
I've never heard it explained that way, and that's hilarious.
Well, that's how I think a lot of people think about this. You know what I mean? Yeah. And project managers definitely see it that way, but I think the general public sees it that way as well. You know what I mean? They think, well, there's a team of 500 people, so the game should be able to be done in X number of time. Versus if there was 100 people, that's not how it works. Yeah. You can't throw developers at a problem and have it just scale. Time doesn't scale linearly for developers. That's not how it works.
The more developers you put on, there's more and more and more overhead too.
Well, it's a diminishing return to the point where the cost outweighs the return. That's just because you've got communication overlap. You've got, we shouldn't get into all that kind of stuff. But
this is too developer. Yeah. Let's go back to our Auteur topic.
I guess kind of trying to bring it back. This is actually the kind of stuff, not maybe this to this level of detail, but what I would like to see is more transparency throughout the process from developers so that gamers can see, oh, this is going wrong and there's this problem involved, and developing game, because this happened with Broken Age too, like with Tim Schafer, right? Like, he got all this, what is it, 2 million or 4 million or whatever it was, because he was the first big one, like big sum of money to come from Kickstarter for Broken Age. And when Broken Age came out, it was good. I've played a bit of it and it's really, really good. But it wasn't what people expected for the amount of money that was given to the project. And Tim Schafer said, kind of like what we're saying right now, he's like, well, there was just, it took a lot more money and a lot more time than I was expecting it was going to take. You know what I mean? And this is a veteran game developer who has produced a lot of high quality titles over the years. And even he drastically underestimated the cost and the time involved, which goes right back to what I said earlier and what you were saying. You know what I mean? Like, no matter how much you estimate for time, it's always going to take longer. And no matter how much money you estimate, it's always going to take more money. And that's where publishers and producers coming in and saying, no, this is the cutoff. Like, whatever we have at this point, we have to ship. And that's where you get games like Star Wars Battlefront, right? Where what's there is great. There's just not enough content. You know what I mean? And that
KOTOR
sucks.
2.
What's that?
KOTOR 2.
Oh, yeah. I never played that game because, KOTOR was
not
amazing.
bad.
And
KOTOR 2 is pretty much more KOTOR. Better battle system. But plot threads that show up and then never get addressed because they didn't actually basically get to finish the game.
Oh, that sucks.
KOTOR 1 had the same issue with that moon. You know how you can go to that one moon and then there's just a shop there and that's the only thing there? Like that's there because they had some shit they were going to put there and then they just didn't have time. So there's just a shop there. That's the only thing. But a lot of things have that issue. There's one more Auteur developer that showed some shit off at E3 that I want to talk about. Are you familiar with Suda51?
Suda51. That sounds so familiar. Who is that? I know. Wait, did they do like No More Heroes?
Yeah, No More Heroes.
Gotcha.
No More Heroes, Killer 7.
Yes.
That latest one that I own, but I haven't actually gone back and played it yet. I bought it on a Steam sale a while back and I haven't had a chance to play it yet. The one where you stare at ladies' boobs a lot. I can't remember what it's called.
Oh yeah, we didn't even talk about that. That's the only problem I have with Hideo Kojima is his weirdly pervy stuff that he puts in games.
Suda51, I'm never sure what level it's operating on. Like, there's a lot of weird sexual shit in a lot of his games. It's kind of a hallmark of his design. Like, but it's often unclear. Like, sometimes I'm like, I think this is like really deconstructing the sexism inherent in games in a way that is very positive. And sometimes I'm like, are you just showing me tits because you want to show me tits? I don't understand what's happening. like I don't know, man. Because there's this whole like, Killer is Dead. That's the one where you just stare at ladies' tits and stuff when they look away from you, and it's this whole mini game that you play. Like that's weird.
Feels creepy.
What's up with that? Yeah. But also, is it just, there's so many like visual novels and stuff where it's like a dating mini game and it's just girls in, clothes and you say the right thing and act right. Is that just satire of those? Kind of seems like it might be. And same like Lollipop Chainsaw Massacre. It's got this main character who's a cheerleader and she kills zombies, but she's actually a fairly developed cheerleader or fairly developed character. Like, she's this cheerleader who seems like, just the fan service character, but like then she has a whole lot of development and backstory and she's really girly and she has a girly chainsaw and stuff like that. But then,
but she's a super badass who mows zombies down. Yeah, she's a
super badass and mows zombies down. So I think a lot of his stuff, at least for me, seems to be deconstructive and making fun of like the shit, but it also seems to at the same time be like, yeah, but also we're going to show you tits because tits are great. Am I right, man? like it's kind of both places. And I understand if that turns people off from his games. I just think it's interesting. And I think the most interesting one for me in this case is what the fuck is that game called? The game where you play as Garcia fucking Hotspur.
No idea.
Yeah. But yeah, hold on. Shadows of the Damned. There we go. Which is an Xbox 360 game. And you play as him, and it's just like a deconstruction of Mario if Mario took place literally in hell. And you were a balls swinging super machismo like Spanish guy named Garcia fucking Hotspur.
Is that actually his name? Garcia fucking Hotspur?
Yeah, I mean, this is, as pointed out by Yahtzee, it's in the subtitles, fucking is capitalized, like it's actually his middle name. And when he gives his name, he says, I'm Garcia fucking Hotspur. It's not lowercase f, it's capital F. And just that character and that game, that could definitely be his middle name, like for real.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, and so you go through this whole thing like to save this girl who's been captured by the King of Hell, and it's very like this is the plot to Mario. Basically, you go through these levels or these worlds, and each world has levels, and you're saving the princess. Except that the princess is basically literally Joan of Arc in this storyline, and she's willingly sacrificed herself and gone to hell as a sacrifice to save somebody else in the, like basically the backstory of this whole game is that she's way more important than you, way more capable than you, way more able to do everything. And the reason she's in this situation that she's in, where she's getting kidnapped in this eternal hellscape, is because she willingly gave herself over to that.
Really?
And actually, spoilers for this game that's very old, but she's the final boss fight in the game. Not the main villain, but her. She's the boss fight at the very end.
Whoa.
Yeah, so I think it's very much deconstructing this idea that like the princess is helpless and you must save her, but still you're the guy saving her. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and that's often the case with satires, that it is the thing that it's making fun of, so that way it can make fun of it effectively.
Yeah.
So I think that one's interesting because it's so hard to pin down how ironic it is or how much it is satire and how much is genuine. But that makes it interesting to me, especially because I can sit there and deconstruct it. Also, I love juvenile dick humor. And you have, like, let's be honest, that's a reason why I like these games. And in that game, you have you have this pal who's just a demon skull head that floats around. His name is Johnson. And he turns into a motorcycle, a big flaming motorcycle that you straddle and ride around. And also he turns into all your guns. And the default gun, all the guns shoot something. So there's a machine gun that shoots teeth. It's called the Teether or the Teether or something like that. And the default weapon, you know what it shoots?
Oh, God.
Shoots bones. And it's called the Boner. And there's a segment in the game where there's like these giant demon enemies that you need to fight, and you don't have enough firepower. So your friend Johnson, who turns into the Boner, I'll just remind you again, he calls up a phone sex line, talks on the the phone sex line in hell. Literally, this happens in the game. It's not even like just hinting that that's what's happening. That's what's happening. And
my God.
He then transforms into the Big Boner, which then Garcia holds in front of his crotch, which is this giant gun, and shoots it as he like thrusts every time he shoots and yells shit like, taste my big boner, and shoots people with it.
Oh, God.
And I am not even remotely above that kind of humor. That makes me laugh super hard. So
that is pretty awesome.
But again, I can see how easily you could be turned off of these games where you're like, that is so fucking dumb and juvenile. I'm not on board with this. I'm like, all right, fine. That's cool. It's not for you. It's okay.
Okay. More for me. Oh my God.
But yeah, I like Suda. He also does a lot of weird deconstruction stuff. There's some good information, like people have written about No More Heroes, about how it's deconstructing boss fights and the way that games are centered around boss fights. Very cool. Yep. And so he's got this new game that I am super confused about what the hell it even is, but it's like some sort of ultra violent weird thing with a dude who's just got no shirt on and big abs and super sexy and a gas mask.
What game is that?
Let It Die.
Oh, I didn't even hear about that.
Yeah. So, you play like some super sexy guy in underpants and a gas mask, just running around killing zombies or something.
All right. Okay.
Now, what I'm confused about is that it's a free-to-play game.
Oh, and that feels kind of yucky.
Yeah, and so I don't know what their monetization... Like, is it just a single-player game? If so, what the hell's your monetization? Like, what is it? Like, all your games are single-player action games. How do you monetize those in a free-to-play environment?
Different underpants. You can buy different underpants.
Yeah, but would you like that a lot? Do that a lot in a single-player game?
People spend a lot of money on hats in Team Fortress.
Yeah, but because it's multiplayer, because other people see those hats.
Right. Other people can see the hats.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll be a multiplayer component.
I don't know. See, that's what I'm confused about. So I'd like to hear more about that because I like these Suda games. But yeah, I don't know. Don't know where that's going. There's been a lot of interesting stuff coming out of E3 for these developers. I'm glad Konami for sure. I'm not Konami. God damn it. I did it now.
I mean, it's close, right? It's like, it's easy to think about. Yeah.
And it's so like, for the longest time, Kojima just is Konami. Oh, and now he's not there anymore. And I'm very glad that he's gone. Like, and as soon as he's gone, he's like, here's my new awesome AAA game that I'm making. Yep. I'm doing fine. I don't fucking need them. And
not as soon. I mean, it's been like almost a year. Like, and that was like he had like a non-compete and an NDA that he couldn't do anything for a while. And so that's why he was so quiet, right? Yeah. But apparently, I don't know how he got around this, but like they've been working on this Death Stranding for a while now, somehow getting around like the non-compete and the NDA. Mm-hmm. And I think the non-compete had to do with why Silent Hills and PT were dropped on the floor is because Kojima couldn't do anything with them, and Konami said they weren't going to do anything with him either because Kojima wasn't there. Yeah. And so just like nobody could do anything.
It's also very possible that Konami had some rights to those because he was working on them, you know?
Yeah. Which again is just, I mean, that's the whole disrespect to the gamers. Like, I mean, like why wouldn't, because I guarantee Sony would have bought that. Like if somebody could have bought the rights to those games from Konami, they would have paid a shit ton of money because everyone would have fucking bought that. I mean, oh my God, like people went ape shit for PT and Silent Hills. Like, they would have eaten that up.
And there probably will never be another Zone of the Enders game, which is highly disappointing to me. Yeah. Because that IP is now just trapped with Konami. Yep. And Konami doesn't give a shit. So
no, they don't care.
Hopefully they'll just
you know how they prove they don't care? They made a fucking Ford ad using Metal Gear. Oh yeah. That's how much they don't care. Yeah. Fuck Konami. So I think this is probably a good place to wrap up. This was fun. Like, we started out talking about Kojima, got to the whole Auteur thing. This is fun. This was good. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So, I guess we could talk about the hiatus in the opening. We don't need to talk about that now. Cool. Okay. Okay. So I guess we can just end it here. Thank you for listening to another week of us ramble about video game stuff and nerdery. We hope you enjoyed this week, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
I don't know. Especially in a time like this, maybe it doesn't really mean anything. Maybe it's not a big deal. I don't know. Maybe it is a big deal. I have no fucking clue. But like what I said, like there are people like me outside the LGBT community for whom the LGBT community is like a major source of like security and comfort. And like, I'm not crazy because here's these awesome people over here who I can identify with in a lot of ways and I can have a lot of fun with and I can be myself and I don't have to worry because they understand why it feels so weird to be me. You know what I mean? And they understand some of the stuff that I go through and I understand some of the stuff that they go through. And it's not exactly the same, but like it's enough similar that there's so much that I don't have to explain. And there's so much that they just get, you know what I mean? Like, and that's just so important. And it's such a big deal. And I think like, again, I don't want to make this about me, but like for all the shit that the LGBT community gets, I just want them to know that there are people out there for which they are really important, like really important.